Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I've got a very fun video previewing the Celtics Heat matchup in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I'm really excited for this matchup because these are two really good teams. They have a lot of very fun players. It's a matchup of the second and third best players in the Eastern Conference in Jimmy Butler and Jason Tatum. Two guys that play the same kind of position on the wing and are likely going to be guarding each other for a large portion of this series. So I'm very excited for that. And it's also a battle of maybe the two best coaches in the game, but definitely two of the best 5 or 6 coaches in the game. So there's going to be a lot going on in this series that's going to be a lot of fun. So let's get right into talking about it. For me, the first thing to talk about is the Boston end of the floor, with Boston having the ball. The Heat played great defense against the Bucks. They were able to build a wall and shut down Giannis and not let him do the things that he does against teams, because obviously we've seen that he's one of the most dominant forces in the entire NBA. A lot of people say the most dominant force since Shaquille O'Neal. So when you've got a guy like that and you're able to build a beautiful defensive scheme to just completely shut him down, that is really good. And they were able to do that, and it's a large reason why they were able to win that series. However, the Heat do have one weakness, and that's their defense at the point of attack. Their guards that are going to be guarding the guards for Boston are Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, and Kendrick Nunn. Do any of you, those three names, get you very excited on the defensive end of the floor? Because they certainly don't get me too excited. That's what's very intriguing to me. What is that Kemba Walker matchup looking like? Because I think Kemba is going to be able to pretty much shred any of those three guys if they're guarding him. The same can be said of Duncan Robinson. So is Spoelstra going to put a guy like Jimmy Butler or a guy like Iguodala on Kemba Walker? I kind of doubt it, because this Boston offense just has so many weapons. If you put Butler on Walker, then you have whichever one of those guards is in the game, Dragic or Hero or Nunn, they're forced to guard Jaylen Brown or Gordon Hayward or Jason Tatum. And those matchups are even more scary if you're the Heat than the Walker matchup. So the Heat are going to struggle there, but Spoelstra is a great coach. I'm sure he'll make adjustments. Kemba is also coming off of two really bad games for him in Game 6 and 7 of that Raptors series, which was a wonderful series. I think I'll be making a video and posting it probably before I post this one, because I'll post this one on Tuesday when Game 1 of this series is going on, and I think I'll post the one talking about Game 7 of the Raptors-Celtics series tomorrow, which is Sunday. So that one's probably already out, and you may have already seen it. But that was a great series, and Nick Nurse went to a box and 1 on Kemba Walker, and it worked wonders on Kemba. Kemba really struggled to get his offense going in those two games. He was taking a lot of really tough shots off the dribble, and they weren't going in for him. He really had 2 poor games, and maybe the Heat can build off of that, but I don't think that Spoelstra is as creative as Nick Nurse on the defensive end of the floor. So I think that he's much less likely to make that kind of innovative, maybe even insane defensive adjustment of throwing the box and 1 at Kemba. So if that's the case, then what are the Heat going to do to slow him down? So I think that this is a huge series for Kemba. It's his first chance to, well, he's never made the Eastern Conference semifinals, never won a playoff series before this year. And this is a chance for him to be the second best player on a finals team. So if he's able to step up and have 30-point games in this series, then I think Miami is going to have a lot of trouble, because I really don't think that there's a great adjustment there for Spoelstra in order to shut down Kemba. I mean, do you trap him? Kemba's a pretty good playmaker also. Obviously, scoring's his forte, but he's a good playmaker as well. So if you're going to trap him, it's not like you're trapping Jamal Murray. It's not like you're trapping Donovan Mitchell. Those two guys are great, but their passing is not quite on the same level as Kemba's. So I don't know. Obviously, Eric Spoelstra knows far more about basketball than I do, but I think that Kemba is going to give this team fits, and it's going to be a difficult matchup for them. Moving on from Kemba, Jason Tatum versus Jimmy Butler, like I said earlier, is one of my favorite matchups in this series. Probably my favorite matchup. I mean, how can it not be? They're the two best players on the same team, and it's likely that they'll be guarding each other a large portion of the time. Obviously, Jaylen Brown will probably get some looks on Butler, and Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala will get plenty of looks on Jason Tatum. But it's really a battle for who's the second best player in the East besides Giannis Antetokounmpo. Before this bubble, I would have given that to Joel Embiid, but with the rise of Jason Tatum and Jimmy Butler just proving to us what we already knew about him, of his ability as a leader and a clutch player, I don't think that there's a debate that can be made that Joel Embiid is better than either of these two right now. At least not until we see a bit more out of Joel, because he really didn't look great in the seeding games or the playoffs. Obviously, he put up good numbers, but he was also playing against a Celtics team that had the 6'8" Daniel Theis guarding his 7-foot large body. So I would say this is a battle for the second best player in the Eastern Conference, and I would give that to Jimmy right now, just because I think that Tatum is obviously probably a better shot maker because he's got that lethal pull-up game, but Jimmy can also knock down really, really difficult shots when the Heat need him to down the stretch in the fourth quarter, and Jimmy's a better playmaker. He's, I'd say, a better rebounder at this point. Tatum's a really good rebounder as well, but I would give Jimmy the edge. And Tatum has come a long way as a playmaker, and he really wasn't a good playmaker coming into the bubble. I think he only averaged 3 or 4 assists per game, but in the bubble, he's been much improved, and I don't think that he's getting enough credit for that because his ability to make plays for his teammates has been really, really good in the bubble, but it's not Jimmy Butler level of good. So I give Jimmy the advantage there, and Tatum is also a really, really good defender, but Jimmy Butler is a top 5 defender in the NBA. He's definitely all defense level player. I think that he deserved to get second team all defense. But that doesn't take away, not getting an award does not take away from the great defender that Jimmy Butler is, and everybody knows that he's great. So I would give Jimmy the edge for now. Tatum also just is younger, and we haven't seen as much of him. This is really the first season where he's been this level of superstar. So it's hard to say that he's the second best player in an entire conference in the NBA, but he's a great player, and I'm just so excited to see these two throwing it down. I think that Jimmy will not always be guarding Tatum. When he's not on Tatum, he'll be on Jaylen Brown, and I think that's a really tough matchup for Jaylen just because of the physicality Jimmy plays with. And Jaylen, from what I've seen, has kind of struggled with those more physical defenders. OG Anunoby gave him a lot of trouble in that Celtics series, in the Raptors series. So it'll be interesting to see there what those matchups look like. I think that putting Crowder on Tatum and Butler on Brown is probably their best option, so maybe we won't see as much of Tatum versus Butler as I would like, but either way, those are some really, really good defenders on some really, really good offensive players, so that's going to be awful exciting. Over to the Miami end of the floor, the matchup that stands out to me, Miami's second best player in Bam Adebayo taking on Daniel Theis. That's Miami's biggest mismatch, and I'm going to be really, really excited to see how Bam plays in this series because I think that the Celtics are a better matchup for Miami than Miami is for Boston. I might have said that wrong. I think that Boston has a good matchup here, and I'm predicting that Boston will win in 6 games. That is my prediction. I was going to save it for the end, but I'll say it now just because it kind of works in with what I'm talking about. But I think that if Bam can get going, he can protect the ball, because that's something he's struggled with in the seeding games and in the playoffs is turnovers. You'll see games where he has 6 or 7 turnovers, and it's like, wow. I mean, I get he has the ball in his hands a lot, but he's still a center. Like, he doesn't have the ball in his hands that much, does he? Or he should be turning the ball 6 to 7 times, turning the ball over 6 to 7 times per game. So, if he can take care of the ball, if he continues to knock down those 15-footers that he's been hitting this playoff run for them, and if he's hitting that shot, he's so scary because he's such a physical player. He can get to the line. He's a good finisher, a really good dunker, really strong at the rim. Very hard to contest his shots and force him to miss those shots inside. So if he's hitting those 15-footers, it just adds another element to his game. And I think that Bam is really the X factor in this series, because there's so much that he can do for Miami that really just gives them an advantage over Boston, especially because he has guys that are not the best centers playing against him. Guys in Daniel Theis, Robert Williams. Is Kanter going to get some run in this series? Maybe he will. I don't know about the Kanter matchup in this one, because obviously Bam is a physical player, so maybe you like the size that can bang with Bam. But another thing that I've noticed with Bam is he really doesn't get in foul trouble, and that's kind of where Kanter is good, because he's just such a good physical presence inside. He can draw a lot of fouls, but considering Bam is not a foul-prone guy, not like Mitchell Robinson or Jaren Jackson Jr., or even Giannis for that matter. So I think that maybe this is not a Kanter series once again. So we're going to see a lot of Robert Williams minutes, maybe some, probably not Grant Williams minutes at the 5, just because of the prowess that Bam has. I don't think that you can throw a wing at him like Grant Williams, just because Bam is so strong and he's going to take advantage of that matchup. He's going to get to the line. He's going to just be a menace. That pick and roll between Bam and Dragic, or Bam and Butler, or whatever it is, that can have a lot of success against Boston, because obviously Theis is a really, really good perimeter defender, but those guys for Boston are not great in the post, I don't think. Actually, I shouldn't say that, because Jaylen Brown really, really impressed me with his defense on Siakam in the post. He was able to wall up, use his body, and just prevent Siakam from backing him into oblivion every time. So I think that that's maybe another spot where I thought Miami had an advantage, but now that I think about it more, maybe that's more on Boston's favor, just because their guards are capable. But obviously, if Kemba's on Bam, that's game over. And that Dragic Adebayo pick and roll is probably my favorite, because Dragic is a better off the bounce shooter than Jimmy Butler is. So I think we'll probably see a heavy dose of that pick and roll, just because of the advantages it can bring. The Duncan Robinson pick and roll is interesting to me too, just because he will be able to shoot the ball over Kemba if they're able to get switches like that. The kind of Duncan sets a screen for Jimmy, or Duncan sets a screen for Dragic and pops out to the three-point line, as we saw him do frequently against the Bucks, and the Bucks just seemed to never adjust to it. And Duncan luckily missed a lot of shots, but he was able to get a lot of really open looks against Milwaukee. So if he's able to generate those same kind of looks, you can't think that he's going to have back-to-back poor shooting series. I mean, he only shot 35% in the 5 games against the Bucks. So I think that we'll see him regress more towards his mean in that matter, and see him shoot much closer to 40-45% than 35%. So that's just another weapon for Miami. Miami also has an advantage on the bench. Marcus Smart is probably the best bench player in this entire series, but after him it falls off to Brad Wanamaker, Semi Ojeleye, and Grant Williams. And are you taking those guys over the Heat's outstanding depth of Tyler Hero, who I love? If there's close games, I like Miami winning close games, just because of Butler's ability as a closer, as well as Hero's ability to hit big shots if he's open. So there's another advantage to Miami. I think they're a better clutch team than Boston is, especially because we saw Boston lose a lot of close games to Toronto. But where was I going with this before? Oh, I was talking about Miami's bench. So Jimmy Butler, Andre Iguodala, Kendrick Nunn, Kelly Olynyk, Derek Jones Jr. There's a lot of guys in this series that have potential to make a really, really big impact off the bench for Miami. Kelly Olynyk is an interesting one to me because he'll be getting the bulk of the backup center minutes. Actually, all of the backup center minutes. Myers Leonard barely played against Milwaukee. The only game he played in was the game that Olynyk was not able to go. I think it was game 3 or 4. I can't remember which one. But in the game where Olynyk didn't play, that was the only time Myers Leonard played. But Olynyk is a really, really good matchup against Robert Williams. So I would not be surprised to see Brad Stevens go to a more Tice playing the Olynyk minutes and Williams getting some more looks against Bam. Because Williams is a bigger, more physical guy than Tice. Tice has a great feel for the game. I love Daniel Tice. I love watching him play just because he understands how basketball works and he has a really good feel for how it goes. But he just doesn't have the size and bulk to compete with Bam. And that's a bit of an advantage that Robert Williams can bring to this series. So maybe Robert Williams gets some more matchups against Bam, and those Olynyk minutes are minutes where Tice is playing because of Tice's better ability to play on the perimeter defensively over Williams' ability to play on the perimeter, just because Olynyk plays more like a wing or a guard, like a perimeter player, more so than guys more so than Bam does. I mean, more so than he does like a center. Olynyk is pretty much a perimeter player in a 7-footer's body who plays defense on centers. He plays like a stretch 4, and I just think that that's a better matchup for Tice than it is for Robert Williams. So I would expect Brad Stevens to be playing Tice or playing Robert Williams in more of those matchups against Bam. Tice more in the matchups against Kelly Olynyk. Building off of that whole bench thing, like I said, Hero is great off the bench. They need him to continue to play the way he did in that Milwaukee series where he's just hunting his shot, knocking down open looks, and down the stretch, not being afraid and being a great clutch player. And he's certainly capable of doing that. We saw it in the Milwaukee series with all those big threes he hit. He didn't even play, game 4 was probably his worst game of the series, and then he didn't play well at all until the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter and overtime, when he made 3 huge threes that were just, as a Milwaukee fan, demoralizing. Oh man, this guy is so stinking good. But if he can have a good impact, Duncan Robinson can get good looks. Those are the guys that Miami needs to step up to beat Boston. Marcus Smart is going to have a huge role in this series. I actually think that he's probably going to play a bit of one in those minutes where Kemba is out of the game just because of the defense he can play on Dragic. I expect him to get a lot of minutes guarding Dragic just because Dragic is probably the toughest matchup for Boston. They've got easily guys that they can throw at Jimmy. Obviously, it's not easily because Jimmy's really good and it's hard to stop him, but Tatum and Brown are the same kind of size, the kind of defenders that you want to have when you're playing Jimmy Butler. So Marcus Smart on Dragic makes a lot of sense to me in his minutes, and I think that can be a big impact for the Celtics too, if Smart can lock down Dragic whenever he's guarding him. Hayward, all of this is assuming that Smart's coming off the bench. Like I said, I think I said Smart will come off the bench and get some minutes guarding Dragic, and all of this is assuming that Gordon Hayward is back, and I'm pretty sure that he's playing in Game 1. I don't know for certain, but I believe so, and Hayward has a chance to be a very impactful player in this series too, as just another guy that can give you 20 points for the Celtics. And with the shot forward step up and playmaking step up we saw from Marcus Smart in that Raptors series, this team just has so many weapons on the perimeter. And because of that, and Miami's weakness guarding the point of attack, like I said, I think that Kemba's going to have a huge series. I think that Tatum and Brown are going to continue to play like the great young players that they are. I think Gordon Hayward is going to come out and play great coming off of his injury. I shouldn't say that because we don't know how he's going to play off of his injury, but he's going to want to play great. He's going to have a fire lit under him. I just don't see Miami winning. I can't, obviously. I shouldn't say that because I think Miami's great, but I'm making a prediction in this video, and I'm predicting Boston in 6 because I think that they have too many great perimeter players, and they're just going to be able to do a lot to exploit Miami's weaknesses. If Miami's role players, the Jay Crowder, Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn group, if those guys play well, it elevates Miami's chances, and if Bam has a great series, it elevates them further, and quite honestly, I can see Bam and Jimmy just carrying this team because of how great those two are, and Bam's ability to exploit the mismatch of the Celtics big guys that are going to be on him. But I just think that in the end, the Celtics have too much, and they're going to take this series in 6 games. So thanks for watching. Leave your prediction in the comments down below. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, like and subscribe. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me, and I will see you all again very soon.